I always dreamed of giving my dad something big, something that would show him how much I appreciated every sacrifice he made for our family. Growing up in Boston, we never had much. Our apartment in Dorchester was small, the heating barely worked in winter, and Dad would often skip meals just to make sure my brother Mike and I had enough. But no matter how tight money got, he never complained. Dad had always loved classic cars, especially old Fords. On Sunday afternoons, he'd sit in his worn leather armchair with a cup of black coffee, flipping through car magazines with reverence. His eyes would light up at the sight of a '67 Mustang Fastback in midnight black. "Now that's a machine, Tommy," he'd say to me, his rough fingers tracing the glossy image. "Something about those lines just gets you right here." He'd tap his chest and smile. I made a promise to myself back then, at just 15 years old. One day, I'd give him that car. The dream was simple: work hard, save every penny, and one day hand him the keys to something he could be proud of. After high school, while Mike drifted between jobs and spent most nights at Murphy's Bar, I picked up 2 jobs: waiting tables at Rosie's Diner during the day and delivering groceries for Hannaford's at night. The manager at Rosie's, Sheila, a tough but fair woman with a smoker's laugh, would sometimes slip me extra shifts when she saw how exhausted I was. "You're killing yourself, kid," she'd tell me while counting out my tips. "Whatever you're saving for better be worth it." Every week was a blur of exhaustion. I'd come home to our shared apartment with aching legs and barely enough energy to shower. The small shoebox under my bed slowly filled with cash, 5s, 10s, and the occasional 20, each bill bringing me closer to my goal. My friends from high school, Denny, Carlos, and Jake, stopped calling after a while. They didn't understand why I was pushing myself so hard. "Live a little, Tommy," Denny insisted the last time we spoke. "You're 22, not 42. I missed birthdays, holidays, even my community college graduation ceremony. When Dad asked why I was working so much, I'd shrug and mumble something about saving for the future. Part of me wanted to tell him, to see the hope in his eyes, but I knew the surprise would be worth the wait. The seasons changed. Fall turned to winter, then spring, then summer, and back again. For almost 2 years, I lived on ramen noodles and coffee, wearing the same 3 shirts until they were threadbare. I tracked every penny in a small notebook I kept in my back pocket. The pages became worn and coffee-stained, but the numbers kept growing. Some nights, I'd lie awake, my body aching from standing all day, and doubt would creep in. Was I wasting my youth? Would he even want the car? But then I'd remember how he'd worked 3 jobs when Mom got sick, how he never once complained about the medical bills that nearly bankrupted us, and my resolve would strengthen. Finally, after 23 months, I had enough for a solid down payment. I'd found a '67 Mustang Fastback at Commonwealth Motors, not mint condition but beautifully restored, with a gleaming black paint job that looked wet even when dry. Mr. Patel, the owner, had seen me coming in just to look at it for months. When I finally walked in with the cash, he clapped me on the shoulder and said, "I knew you'd be the one to take her home." I secured a loan to cover the rest, signing my name with trembling fingers. The payments would be steep, but manageable if I kept both jobs. As I drove that car out of the lot, the engine's deep rumble vibrated through me like a second heartbeat. The leather seats still had that new car smell, mixed with something older, something that spoke of road trips and freedom. When I pulled into our driveway, the late afternoon sun caught the chrome trim, making it flash like lightning. My heart thudded in my chest as I called out for him. Dad stepped outside, narrowing his eyes against the sun, and walked toward the car slowly. His work boots scraped against the concrete, his hands deep in the pockets of his faded jeans. "It's yours, Dad," I said, holding out the keys. My voice cracked, betraying the emotion I'd been holding back for years. "I got it for you." He stood silently for a second, his weathered face unreadable. Then he gave a single nod, the corner of his mouth lifting slightly. I thought I could see a shimmer in his eyes, but what came next nearly shattered me. "I'll give it to your brother," he said flatly. "He needs it more than I do." The keys hung in the air between us, suddenly heavy as lead. I stood there stunned, unsure if I had heard him right. "My brother?" The same one who hadn't worked a steady job in years? The one who crashed 2 cars and blamed everyone but himself? My voice trembled. But Dad, I bought this for you. He waved me off, already pulling out his cell phone from his pocket. Mike's had a rough go of it lately. Lost his job at the warehouse last month. Been walking to interviews. The late afternoon sun suddenly felt too hot on my skin. Did you hear what I said? This is for you. It's your dream car. I've been saving for almost 2 years. Dad's eyes hardened in that way they did when his mind was made up. I know what it is, Tommy. And it's real nice of you. He glanced at the Mustang, then back at me. But a car's just a thing. Family comes first. I was family too, wasn't I? Or was I just the mule pulling the cart while everyone else rode comfortably? Mike. Dad was already calling into his phone. Get over here. Got something to show you. The excitement in his voice felt like sandpaper against my raw emotions. I stood there, keys still dangling from my fingers as Dad walked around the car, admiring it. She's a beauty, all right. Your brother's gonna flip. My throat felt like I'd swallowed glass. Dad, please. You don't understand. I worked double shifts. I missed Thanksgiving last year because I picked up extra hours. We all make choices, son. He cut me off. Nobody asked you to do all that. That was the problem. Nobody ever asked me to do anything. I just did it. Always the responsible one. Always the one who could be counted on while Mike floated through life on charm and excuses. 20 minutes later, Mike's beat-up Honda Civic pulled into the driveway. He stepped out, his hair messy, wearing the same Bruins t-shirt I'd seen him in 3 days ago. His eyes widened when he saw the Mustang. Holy shit, he exclaimed, circling it like a shark. Whose is this? Dad clapped him on the shoulder, grinning wider than he had for me. Yours, if you want it. Tommy here got it, but we think you could use it more. The word escaped my lips before I could stop it. Mike didn't even look at me. He ran his hand along the glossy black hood, then peered inside at the leather interior. Are you serious? This is mine. Dad nodded, and I watched as my brother's face lit up with the joy I'd imagined seeing on my father's face for 2 years. The insurance and registration still need to be sorted, I said mechanically, my voice sounding distant to my own ears. And there's a loan that needs to be paid monthly. Mike finally glanced at me. Yeah, whatever. I can handle it. The same thing he'd said about the last 2 cars before wrecking them. Dad handed him the keys, my keys that I'd dropped on the hood. Take good care of her. My brother slid into the driver's seat like he belonged there, adjusting the mirror and running his hands over the steering wheel. The engine roared to life, and I felt each vibration like a physical blow. I'm going to take Stephanie for a spin, Mike said, referring to his on-again, off-again girlfriend. She's gonna lose her mind when she sees this. Dad waved him off like a proud parent sending a child to prom. I stood there, invisible, as the car I'd sacrificed everything for disappeared down the street. He needed this win, Dad said quietly once Mike was gone. Been down on his luck for too long. I wanted to scream. I wanted to remind him that Mike's bad luck was self-inflicted. That while I was working 16-hour days, my brother was playing video games in his apartment or drinking at Murphy's. That every opportunity he'd ever been given, he'd squandered. Instead, I asked, what about the loan payments? Dad frowned. You're still making those, right? It's your loan. It felt like a knife twisting in my chest. I'd handed over the keys to his dream, and he still expected me to pay for it while my brother enjoyed the benefits. I tried to reason with him one last time, told him how hard I had worked, how many nights I had gone hungry just to save a little more. How this was meant to be a thank you for everything he'd done for us growing up. He didn't care. His tone was cold. You're always so dramatic, Tommy. It's a car, not a kidney. He turned and walked back toward the house, case closed. I followed him inside, my legs moving automatically. Our small living room felt suffocating. The worn couch where Dad sat to watch the Red Sox games, the outdated TV, the faded family photos on the wall, everything I'd known my whole life suddenly felt alien. In my bedroom, I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the empty shoebox where I'd kept my savings. The small notebook filled with careful calculations and dreams lay open beside it. 2 years of my life, reduced to a few scribbled numbers and an empty cardboard box. My phone buzzed. A text from Mike. "This car is sick. Steph loves it. Taking it up to the Cape this weekend." I didn't respond. Instead, I pulled my duffel bag from under the bed and began filling it with clothes. Not everything, just enough. My hands moved mechanically, folding t-shirts and jeans, grabbing socks and underwear. I took my toothbrush from the bathroom and the envelope of emergency cash I kept taped behind my dresser. Dad was in the kitchen when I walked out, rummaging through the refrigerator. "You want a beer?" he asked without looking up. I didn't answer. I just walked out the front door, closing it softly behind me. I didn't say goodbye, didn't leave a note. I just walked away with my wallet and phone and the duffel bag slung over my shoulder, carrying only the unbearable weight of betrayal. The twilight air felt clean in my lungs as I walked to the bus stop, heading downtown. I rented a small room in a boarding house in Southie with what little cash I had left and decided to cut them off, for good. Mrs. O'Malley, the elderly owner, didn't ask questions when I paid for 2 weeks up front. Just handed me a key and told me breakfast was at 7 if I wanted it. That night, lying on a strange bed in a strange room, I made a decision. I didn't care what happened to the car anymore. I didn't care what happened to him or to Mike. I had given my father my heart in the form of keys, and he handed it to someone else without blinking. The next 2 days were quiet, almost peaceful in a strange way. My room at Mrs. O'Malley's was small but clean, with faded flowered wallpaper and a window that looked out onto a narrow alley. The shared bathroom down the hall had temperamental plumbing, but after years of our apartment's failing water heater, I was used to quick showers. I called Sheila at Rosie's Diner and told her I needed some time off. Her concern was evident even through the phone. "You okay, kid? You sound rough." "I'm fine," I lied. "Just need a few days to sort some things out." "Take the week," she said. "Your section will be here when you get back." I thanked her and hung up. I didn't call my supervisor at Hannaford's. I couldn't bear the thought of delivering groceries to other families, watching fathers and sons together, mothers and daughters laughing over what cereal to buy. Those small moments of connection I'd taken for granted now felt like salt in an open wound. I ignored every call from Dad and Mike, turned off all notifications, and spent time just trying to remember who I was before I lost myself in trying to earn someone's love. My room became a sanctuary of sorts. I slept late, ordered cheap takeout from the Chinese place down the street, and watched whatever was on the ancient TV mounted in the corner. For the first time in almost 2 years, I had no responsibility but to myself. No double shifts, no loan calculations, no desperate saving. The freedom felt foreign, almost frightening. Who was I without the weight of obligation? What did Tommy Callahan want for himself? I started thinking about going back to school, maybe finding a way to rebuild something that was mine alone. Bunker Hill Community College was nearby, and they offered night classes in business management. Maybe I could finally finish that associate's degree I'd started before the car obsession took over. On the second afternoon, I ventured out to a small bookstore in the neighborhood. The shop owner, a gray-haired man named Walter with thick glasses and ink-stained fingers, helped me find some books on personal finance and small business management. "Starting fresh?" he asked as he rang up my purchases. I nodded. "Something like that." "Good for you," he said, handing me the paper bag of books. Nothing wrong with new beginnings. Walking back to the boarding house, I stopped at a small park and sat on a bench, watching pigeons fight over breadcrumbs. A mother pushed her toddler on a swing, her laughter mingling with the child's squeals of delight. An elderly couple walked hand in hand along the path, matching each other's slow pace. Life continuing all around me, unburdened by my personal drama. For the first time in months, I slept 8 hours without waking up in panic. No dreams about missed payments or disappointed faces. Just darkness and rest. I even went for a morning walk along the harbor, listening to music on my old earbuds, letting myself breathe without the weight of family expectation pressing on my shoulders. Mrs. O'Malley nodded approvingly when I came down for breakfast that third morning. "Colors coming back to your face," she said, sliding a plate of scrambled eggs and toast in front of me. Whatever you're running from, seems like the distance is doing you good. I didn't correct her assumption that I was running from something. In a way, she wasn't wrong. I was running from the person I'd become, the doormat, the fixer, the one who would sacrifice everything for people who wouldn't give me a second thought. After breakfast, I sat on my bed with one of Walter's books, making notes about community college courses and potential career paths. The boarding house was quiet. Most residents were at work or school. Mrs. O'Malley had gone grocery shopping. The silence wrapped around me like a comfortable blanket. Out of habit, I reached for my phone to check the time, and that's when I saw it. 78 missed calls. All from Dad, Mike, and even some family friends like Uncle Pete and our neighbor Mrs. Donovan. My heart sank as I scrolled through the text messages, each one more frantic than the last. Tommy, pick up. Where the hell are you? This isn't funny anymore. Dad's worried sick. We need to talk now. And then the last message that popped up from Mike. You need to pay the rest of the Sierra loan now. They're coming to repossess it. I stared at the screen, hands trembling. The silence had been a lie. The storm was waiting just behind it. More messages flooded in as I held the phone. Tommy, please. I can't lose this car. Dad's freaking out. You can't just ditch your responsibilities like this. My brother's audacity was breathtaking. Responsibilities? Where was his sense of responsibility when he accepted a car he knew I'd saved for? Where was Dad's when he handed over my dream without a second thought? I sat back against the headboard, letting the phone drop onto the bedspread. Outside my window, a garbage truck rumbled down the alley, men shouting to each other as they worked. Life continuing, unaffected by my small crisis. Part of me, a part one wasn't proud of, felt a surge of satisfaction. They'd taken my gift for granted, and now they were facing the consequences. The loan officer at the bank had been clear: 3 missed payments, and the car would be subject to repossession. I'd made the first payment the day I drove it home. The second would have been due yesterday. I picked up the phone again, thumb hovering over Dad's number. I could fix this. I could drain what little savings I had left, make the payment, keep the peace. It's what I'd always done. But another voice, one that had been silenced for too long, spoke up. Why? Why should I clean up their mess? Why was it always my responsibility to make things right? I put the phone down and returned to my book, but the words blurred before my eyes. The quiet room now felt charged with tension, as if the walls themselves were waiting for my decision. A text from an unfamiliar number pinged. Tommy, it's Stephanie. Mike's a wreck. He said you'd know what to do about the car. Please call him back. Even Mike's girlfriend was being enlisted to guilt me into action. The manipulation was so transparent it would have been laughable if it wasn't so painful. I turned the phone off completely and shoved it under my pillow. Then I grabbed my jacket and headed out. I couldn't sit in that room with the weight of their expectations pressing in on me. The autumn air was crisp as I walked aimlessly through the neighborhood. Yellow and orange leaves skittered across the sidewalk, driven by a cool breeze off the harbor. I ended up at a small coffee shop called Groundwork, where I ordered a black coffee and sat by the window, watching people rush by on their way to important places. For a moment, I envied them their purpose, their direction. I felt adrift, cut loose from the moorings of family and obligation that had defined me for so long. But with that drifting came a strange sense of possibility. For the first time in years, my future was entirely my own. I sipped my coffee and watched as a flatbed tow truck rumbled past the coffee shop window, headed in the direction of my old neighborhood. It might have been coincidence, but I couldn't help wondering if it was on its way to collect a certain black Mustang. I didn't reply to any of the messages. I didn't need to. I knew what was happening. The car I had worked so hard for, the one my dad had so easily given away, was about to be taken. And they wanted me to fix it. To clean up the mess they made. The coffee in my cup had gone cold. I paid my bill and stepped outside into the crisp afternoon air. Without any particular destination in mind, I found myself walking toward the harbor. Boston's waterfront had always calmed me, even as a kid. Something about the vastness of the ocean made my problems seem smaller, more manageable. As I reached the end of a pier, I leaned against the railing and watched fishing boats bobbing on the gentle waves. My phone weighed heavy in my pocket, but I resisted the urge to check it again. Let them panic. Let them feel a fraction of the helplessness I'd felt standing in that driveway, watching my dream being handed away like it meant nothing. A seagull landed on the railing beside me, eyeing me hopefully for food. "Sorry, buddy," I muttered. "I've got nothing to give." The bird cocked its head as if understanding my words before taking flight again, leaving me alone with my thoughts. I wondered about the repossession. The bank would send someone to take the car, probably that tow truck I'd seen earlier. I imagined my dad and brother scrambling, begging the driver to wait. Maybe even trying to call me again, hoping I'd swoop in and save them. But I wouldn't. I couldn't. Part of me felt guilty. Dad had raised us alone after Mom died. He'd worked hard, done his best. But that didn't give him the right to dismiss my feelings, to give away something that meant so much to me without a second thought. And Mike, he'd always been the favorite, the one who got away with everything because he was sensitive, because life was harder for him somehow. My phone buzzed again in my pocket. Against my better judgment, I pulled it out. A text from Dad. "They took the car, Tommy. Are you happy now?" The words hit me like a physical blow. Was I happy? No. But I wasn't sad either. I felt nothing. Or maybe not nothing. Maybe it was relief. The burden of responsibility I'd carried for so long had finally been lifted. The car was gone. The dream was over. And strangely, I felt lighter. I typed a reply, then deleted it. Typed another, deleted that too. What could I possibly say? Sorry the bank repossessed a car that you gave away to someone who couldn't maintain the payments? Sorry I finally stopped enabling Mike's irresponsibility? Sorry I finally stood up for myself? In the end, I put the phone back in my pocket without responding. Some silences speak louder than words. The sun was starting to set as I made my way back to the boarding house. Mrs. O'Malley was in the small common room watching Jeopardy, a cup of tea in her wrinkled hands. She nodded as I passed, her eyes never leaving the screen. "Smart people on that show," she commented. "But book smarts ain't the same as life smarts, you know?" I paused, struck by the simple wisdom of her words. "Yeah, I think I'm figuring that out." She glanced at me, her eyes twinkling behind thick glasses. "Good. About time." In my room, I sat on the edge of the bed and finally turned my phone back on. It immediately began buzzing with notifications. Texts, voicemails, even a few emails. The digital equivalent of my family banging on my door, demanding my attention. One message caught my eye, not from Dad or Mike, but from Stephanie, my brother's girlfriend. "Tommy, you should know something. Mike told your dad that you offered him the car. That's why your dad gave it to him so easily. He thought it was your idea." I read the message 3 times, making sure I understood. Mike had lied? He told Dad that I offered him the car? And Dad believed him without even asking me? It made a twisted kind of sense. Dad's casual dismissal of my gift, his assumption that I'd continue making payments, he thought I was in on it. He thought I was being generous, not that he was taking something precious from me. Another text from Stephanie followed. Mike admitted it to me after they took the car. "He's been lying to everyone. I thought you should know." My hands were shaking as I set the phone down. All this time, I'd been blaming Dad for betraying me when he was working with false information. It didn't excuse everything. He should have asked me, should have seen through Mike's manipulation, but it changed things. Mike, though, my brother had stooped lower than I ever imagined possible. He'd seen how much that car meant to me, how hard I'd worked, and he'd deliberately sabotaged it all. For what? A flashy car to impress his girlfriend? A chance to one-up me? I paced the small room, anger building like steam in a pressure cooker. Part of me wanted to call Mike immediately, to confront him with what I knew. Another part wanted to call Dad, to explain everything. But what good would it do? The car was already gone. The damage was done. Instead, I sat at the small desk by the window and opened one of the books I'd bought, Starting Over, A Guide to Rebuilding Your Life. The irony wasn't lost on me. As darkness fell outside, my phone continued to buzz occasionally, but I ignored it. I had already sacrificed everything, my health, my happiness, my pride, and I wouldn't give them my soul, too. Let them feel the weight of what they'd done. Let them live with the consequences of taking me for granted. That night, I sat alone in the corner of my rented room, reading until my eyes burned, while somewhere out there, the dream I once had was being towed away to some impound lot. It didn't feel like a loss anymore. It felt like justice. I had finally stopped being the fixer, the silent hero. I was done. As I finally climbed into bed, exhausted from the emotional roller coaster of the day, a strange sense of calm settled over me. The car was gone. The truth was out. And for the first time in years, I wasn't responsible for anyone's happiness but my own. I fell asleep thinking about what Mrs. O'Malley had said about life smarts versus book smarts. Maybe it had taken losing everything to finally gain some wisdom. Maybe this was the lesson I needed to learn all along. In my dreams, I saw that Mustang driving away, but instead of feeling loss, I felt only release, as if the car were carrying away all my old habits, all my need for approval, all my misplaced loyalty. I woke just before dawn with the strangest feeling: gratitude. 2 days passed in relative calm. I went back to work at Rosie's, grateful for the routine and the distraction. Sheila raised an eyebrow when I walked in, but didn't ask questions. She just handed me my apron and said, "Table 6 likes their coffee refilled every 15 minutes like clockwork." Just like that, I was back in the flow of normal life. I hadn't checked my phone much since learning the truth about Mike's lie. What was the point? The damage was done, the car was gone, and nothing anyone could say would change that. I focused on rebuilding instead, putting in extra hours at the diner, looking into classes at Bunker Hill, and slowly creating a life that was entirely my own. On my break, I sat at the counter with a turkey sandwich and my community college brochure. The business management program looked promising, practical skills I could use to maybe open my own place someday. Something small but mine. Planning your escape? Sheila asked, refilling my coffee cup without being asked. I shrugged, just exploring options. She studied my face for a moment. "Whatever happened with your family, it's eating at you. Written all over your face, kid." "It's nothing," I said, taking a bite of my sandwich to avoid further conversation. "Sure it is." She wiped the counter with practiced sweeps. "Just remember, family's complicated. Sometimes the people who hurt us most are the ones who love us most." I wanted to tell her she was wrong, that real love doesn't hurt like this, doesn't take and take until there's nothing left. But I just nodded and turned the page of my brochure. That evening, after my shift ended, I walked the long way back to the boarding house. The streets of South Boston were alive with the usual Thursday night energy, people heading to bars, couples walking hand in hand, tourists consulting maps on their phones. Normal life continuing all around me. When I finally checked my phone that night, another message was waiting. This time, it wasn't angry. It wasn't demanding. It was desperate. "Please call me. I didn't know how much it meant to you. I messed up. I'm sorry." My dad, the man who had never once apologized, never once admitted fault in all my 22 years, had finally cracked. But I wasn't sure how to feel. I had wanted this, hadn't I? Some kind of acknowledgement. And now that it was here, it felt empty. I sat on the edge of my bed, reading and rereading the message. Part of me wanted to delete it without responding, to continue the silence that had become my only protection. Another part yearned to call him immediately, to hear the apology directly, to maybe salvage something from the wreckage of our relationship. Before I could decide, another message appeared. "Your brother lied. He told me you offered the car to him." I was blindsided. "I thought you were just being generous." Stephanie told me everything. My heart dropped. So Stephanie had talked to him after all. I could imagine how that conversation went, her guilt over Mike's behavior finally overriding her loyalty to him. Dad continued, "I should have asked you. Should have seen through it. I've been blind when it comes to Mike for too long." The words I'd waited years to hear. An admission that Mike wasn't perfect, that Dad's favoritism had been real, not just my imagination. And yet, I still couldn't bring myself to respond. Could that really be true? Could my brother really have been so manipulative? And could my dad have believed it without asking me first? The answer to both questions was yes. I knew my family well enough to recognize their patterns, their flaws. And yet, I still felt the urge to respond, to fix things, to make everything better. I didn't. Not yet. Instead, I took out my notebook, not the one where I'd tracked my savings for the car, but a new one I'd bought at the bookstore. I started writing, pouring every ounce of pain into it, the sleepless nights, the broken pride, the years I spent chasing his approval. The words flowed like they'd been waiting to escape, filling page after page with memories, hopes, disappointments, and realizations. I wrote about Mom, about how her death had changed us all. How Dad had thrown himself into work, Mike had spiraled into neediness, and I had become the responsible one, the stable one, the one who never caused trouble. I wrote about the car, not just as a thing with wheels and an engine, but as a symbol of everything I'd wanted to say but couldn't find the words for. Thank you. I see you. I appreciate your sacrifices. I wrote about the moment in the driveway, watching my dream being handed to someone else. The shock, the betrayal, the moment when something inside me finally broke. And finally, I wrote about forgiveness, not just for Dad and Mike, but for myself too. For being a doormat. For not speaking up sooner. For letting my need for approval dictate my life for so long. I didn't send it, but writing it made me feel like, maybe for the first time, I was finally healing. The next morning, another text from Dad. I went to the impound lot. Car's still there. If we pay what's owed, we can get it back. I'll sell my fishing gear. Mike's getting a job at the warehouse again. We'll make this right. I read it during my break at Rosie's, standing by the back door with a cigarette I didn't light. The alley smelled like garbage and cooking grease, but the fresh air felt good after hours in the hot kitchen. The offer was tempting. Get the car back. Accept the apology. Return to the way things were. But did I want that? Did I want to go back to being the reliable one, the fixer, the one who never complained? Did I want to watch Dad continue to make excuses for Mike, even as he promised things would be different? And what about the car itself? That gleaming black Mustang had been my dream for so long. But now it was tainted with bad memories, with betrayal and disappointment. Could I look at it without remembering that day in the driveway? Could I sit behind the wheel without feeling the weight of all that sacrifice? I put the unlit cigarette back in the pack and returned to work. For hours later, as I hung up my apron and counted my tips, I still hadn't decided what to do. Back at the boarding house, Mrs. O'Malley was waiting with a plate of cookies and a knowing look. "You've got that face again," she said, pushing the plate toward me. "The one that says you're carrying the weight of the world." I took a cookie and sat at her small kitchen table. "Just family stuff." She nodded sagely. Family can be the greatest blessing and the greatest curse. Sometimes both at once. Did you ever? I paused, searching for words. Did you ever cut someone off? For your own good. Mrs. O'Malley's eyes grew distant. My sister, Colleen. For 15 years, we didn't speak. She married a man I warned her against, and when I said "I told you so" one too many times, she shut me out. What happened? She died. The old woman's voice was matter-of-fact, but her eyes glistened. Cancer. We reconciled at the end, but those 15 years, they're just gone. Can't get them back. I nodded, understanding the weight of her message. Not saying you should forgive whatever they did, she added, pushing herself up from the table with a slight grimace. Just make sure it's worth the cost. That night, I sat on my bed with my phone in hand, Dad's number on the screen. My thumb hovered over the call button as the minutes ticked by. Outside my window, a siren wailed in the distance, then faded. The sounds of the city continued, a testament to life moving forward, with or without my decision. Weeks turned into months. I settled into a routine that felt both foreign and right. Work at Rosie's during the day, night classes at Bunker Hill 3 evenings a week, and weekends spent exploring parts of Boston I'd never had time to see before. I visited the Museum of Fine Arts on a free admission day, walked the Freedom Trail with a tour group of out-of-towners, and found a small bookstore in Cambridge that stayed open until midnight on Saturdays. I made new friends too. Jessie from my business ethics class, who worked as a bartender at a place called Drink, and Alyssa, a waitress at Rosie's who'd started around the same time I returned. They didn't know my history, Didn't have expectations based on who I used to be. With them, I could just be Tommy, not the responsible son, not the reliable brother, just me. Dad tried calling again a few times. I let the calls go to voicemail, listened to his awkward apologies, his updates about home. Mike's working steady now, he said in one message. Warehouse job. Showing up on time and everything. In another, put some new shingles on the roof this weekend. Could have used your help. Each message ended the same way. Call when you can. I never did. Not because I was still angry. The white-hot rage had cooled to something more manageable, but because I wasn't ready. I needed time, real time, to forgive. Not just him, but myself too. For being a pushover. For seeking approval at the cost of my own happiness. For letting resentment build until it exploded. On a rainy Saturday in November, 3 months after I walked out, I found myself near our old neighborhood. I'd been helping Jesse move into a new apartment nearby, and when we finished, I declined his offer of a celebratory beer. Instead, I pulled up my hood against the drizzle and walked the familiar streets, half hoping, half dreading that I might run into Dad or Mike. I didn't. But as I passed Commonwealth Motors, where I'd bought the Mustang all those months ago, I slowed my steps. There in the window, gleaming under the showroom lights, was a car so similar to mine it made my heart stutter. Same model, same year, slightly different color, midnight blue instead of black. Mr. Patel was at his desk, reading glasses perched on his nose as he reviewed some paperwork. He looked up as the bell over the door announced my entrance, recognition dawning slowly on his face. "Tommy Callahan," he said, standing to shake my hand. "Been a while." I nodded, my eyes drawn back to the Mustang in the showroom. "Looks familiar." He followed my gaze and sighed. "Beautiful, isn't she? Not quite like yours, but close. Yours was special. You know what happened to it?" Mr. Patel's expression turned sympathetic. "Repossessed. Bank sold it at auction. These things happen." I walked closer to the blue Mustang, running my hand along its sleek hood. The metal was cool and smooth under my palm, but it didn't stir the same longing it once would have. It was just a car. Beautiful, yes, but just metal and wheels. "You in the market for another?" Mr. Patel asked hopefully. I laughed, the sound surprising even me. "No, one was enough." He nodded understandingly. Some lessons cost more than others. As I left the dealership, the rain had stopped. Weak sunlight broke through the clouds, casting long shadows across the wet pavement. I felt lighter somehow, as if seeing that car, so similar yet different from the one I'd lost, had released something in me. I didn't go straight back to the boarding house. Instead, I found myself walking toward our old apartment. I had no intention of going in, of confronting Dad or Mike. I just wanted to see it, to remind myself that it was real, that the life I'd left behind actually existed. The building looked smaller somehow, shabbier than I remembered. Dad's old Chevy was in the driveway, but there was no sign of the Mustang. Of course not. That dream was gone. I was about to turn away when the front door opened. Dad stepped out, garbage bag in hand, headed for the bins at the side of the house. He looked older, his shoulders more stooped, his movements slower. He hadn't seen me yet, standing half-hidden by the large oak tree across the street. I could have slipped away unnoticed. Could have preserved the distance I'd so carefully maintained these past months. Instead, I found myself stepping forward into the open. "Hey, Dad." He froze, garbage bag dangling from one hand. For a moment, he just stared, as if I might be a mirage that would vanish if he moved too suddenly. Then, slowly, he set the bag down. "Tommy." His voice was rough, uncertain. "You're here." I shoved my hands in my pockets, suddenly nervous. "Just passing by." He nodded, accepting the half-truth. "You look good. Healthy. Thanks. You too." It wasn't entirely true. He looked tired, worn, but it seemed like the right thing to say. An awkward silence stretched between us, filled with all the words we hadn't said, all the hurt we'd caused each other. Finally, Dad cleared his throat. "You want to come in?" I could make coffee. Part of me wanted to refuse, to protect the independence I'd fought so hard for. But another part, the part that had been writing that unsent letter all these months, wanted to at least try. "Sure," I said. "Coffee sounds good." The apartment was cleaner than I remembered, but otherwise unchanged. The same worn furniture, the same faded photographs on the walls. The smell of coffee brewing filled the small kitchen as Dad moved around with familiar efficiency. "Mike's not here," he said, as if reading my thoughts. "Got his own place now, near the warehouse." I nodded, relieved and disappointed in equal measure. "How is he?" Dad poured coffee into 2 mugs, one with a chipped handle that had always been mine, and set them on the table. "Better. Working steady. Seeing a therapist, if you can believe it." I couldn't, not really. Mike had always scoffed at therapy, called it a waste of money. Good for him. Dad sat across from me, his weathered hands wrapped around his mug. "Tommy, about the car," I cut him off. "It doesn't matter anymore." "It does." His voice was firm. "What I did, what we did, it wasn't right. You worked so hard for that car and we just..." He trailed off, shaking his head. "I'm sorry." The words I'd waited so long to hear. 3 simple words that could never erase what happened, but maybe, just maybe, could be the foundation for something new. "I know," I said quietly. And I did know. The anger that had driven me away had faded, leaving behind a sadder but clearer understanding. Dad wasn't perfect. Neither was I. We'd both made mistakes. We talked for almost 2 hours. Really talked, maybe for the first time. About Mom. About the years after she died, when we all coped in different ways. Dad by working himself to exhaustion, Mike by acting out, me by trying to be perfect. About the car, what it had meant to me, why I'd wanted him to have it so badly. "I never needed a fancy car, Tommy," he said at one point. "Just needed you boys to be okay." "I am okay," I told him. Maybe for the first time. When I finally left, promising to call soon, and meaning it this time, the afternoon was fading into evening. I walked back toward the tea station with a strange sense of peace. Nothing had been resolved, not really. The past couldn't be undone. The car was gone. The hurt remained. But something had shifted. A door that had seemed permanently closed was now, if not fully open, at least ajar. A possibility existed where before there had been only finality. The next morning, I woke early and went for a run along the harbor. The December air was crisp, my breath forming small clouds as I jogged. Christmas lights twinkled in windows, and a group of carolers practiced in the small park near the water. As I stretched after my run, watching the sunrise paint the sky in shades of pink and gold, I thought about the car again. It had been my dream for so long, my obsession, my purpose. And losing it had felt like losing everything. But standing there, muscles warm from exertion, face cold from the winter air, I realized something. The car had never been what I truly wanted. What I'd wanted was connection, recognition, love. The car had just been a vehicle, literally and figuratively, for those deeper desires. This isn't a story about revenge. It's not even really a story about a car. It's a story about release. I gave everything I had for love, and when that love wasn't returned the way I hoped, I learned to love myself instead. And that, more than any car or apology, was the gift I truly needed. Later that day, I called the community college to officially register for the spring semester. Then I called Dad, just to check in. Our conversation was still awkward, still tentative, but it was a start. And for now, that was enough. As I hung up, I glanced at the small calendar on my desk. Nearly Christmas. Nearly a new year. Nearly time for new beginnings. Outside my window, snow began to fall, covering the city in a clean, white blanket, nature's way of saying that sometimes we all deserve a fresh start.